I was speaking about how even though the pandemic has created a lot of limitation and separation for people, it's also mysteriously created these ways where we can come together so that we can quite happily be in Odeon, in Amaravati, in places all around the world, and be gathered here together at this one time and in this one venue. So I am very glad to have this opportunity. So I'll begin in the customary way with reciting the Namo Tassa 3 times, and then I'll offer my Dhamma reflections. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhammam Sangham Namasami. I'd like to begin by making it clear that the things that I say are, as is the custom with our tradition, they are offered for reflection. That the words are not to be taken as categorical truths, but really listened to, received, and contemplated, and whatever is of benefit, whatever is useful and meaningful, then people are encouraged to take that and keep that. Whatever is not useful or unbeneficial, then to leave that aside. And as Wang Mo was saying in the introduction, we'll have a substantial amount of time at the end for people to type in your questions, and I can respond to any particular queries or doubts or questions or things that need clarification later on. But I feel it's a good attitude with which to attend to Dhamma teachings, that they're offered for reflection. And in the introduction, we'll have a substantial amount of time at the end for people to type in your questions, and I can respond to any particular queries or doubts or questions or things that need clarification later on. But I think it's a good attitude with which to attend to Dhamma teachings, that they're offered for reflection. And the introduction will have a substantial amount of time at the end for people to type in your questions, and I can respond to any particular queries or doubts. I think we've got a technical hitch there. I'm just hearing myself speaking over again. So Sanjoy, can you do some appropriate tweaking to make my voice not come out twice?
Well, now it is the highest volume.
I think what happened is it's gone on Facebook Live, and I had one of the browsers open, so I've closed that. So excuse me, that was me.
Okay, very good.
We're on Facebook Live, yeah, thank
you. So with respect to the theme for this Dhamma talk, living with wisdom in our daily life, and how to distinguish between mind and wisdom. So there's a couple of specific themes there. So I will start off with the aspect of wisdom in daily life, and then address the other part in terms of the distinction between wisdom and mind, or how we might use those terms. I'll look at that later on. So reflecting on this and how to live with wisdom, the approach I feel is useful is to consider it's a 2-part process, I would suggest. And the first part is to do with how we receive the effects of what has already been caused in the past, what arises here in the present. So our present moment experience, so we're receiving the results of past causes. And so that is something we can't change those causes. The world is that shape. We see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think according to what has happened in the past, or where we are, or the choices that have been made. So the first part then is to do with a sense of attuning to the presently arisen state, the present moment, and to bring attention to that. So with respect to this, and particularly with the pandemic, and then the large numbers of people infected, many more than 200,000 people have passed away in the United States, more than 40,000 here in the UK. So this is a situation having a massive impact on human lives, and all around the world, in most countries around the world. So that the mind easily goes to, how has this happened? Where's it come from? What's it going to turn into? How are we going to find a vaccine? Is that going to work for people? When are we going to be able to travel again? And so on and so forth. So in our ordinary everyday life, the mind continually creates the past and the future. It revives the past, revisits it, reminisces or regrets, or dwells in our memories of the past, and then speculates about how things have come to be, or if they should have been a different way, or how we wish they had been a different way. And similarly, we speculate and plan for the future. We easily create ideas and hopes and fears about the future. Where's it going to go? I really hope they find a vaccine. I really hope it's going to be over. I'm dreading what it's going to be like if this is with us for another year or 2 years or longer. So the mind revives the past very easily, and then dwells in the imagined images of the future very easily. That's our ordinary everyday world in our conversations. So that one of the ways of living with wisdom, I would say, is to examine that habit, to look very closely at that habit, and to really notice how much the mind recreates the past and crafts the future, or it creates an imagined future or futures, and how when the mind does that, then we are necessarily not attuned to the present. We're lost in our memories and our plans. And as a few of you will remember, John Lennon, in one of his songs, quoting Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson, saying, life is something that happens while we're making other plans. So that we miss our life, we miss the reality of the present so easily because we're dwelling in the past and the fabricated future. So with respect to this, there's a particular teaching that the Buddha gave called the Bhaddekarata Sutta, which is sometimes translated as one fortunate attachment. And he points out, it's a short sutta in the middle length discourses, sutta number 131, if you want to look it up. Don't be impressed, I checked that up earlier today, so I haven't memorized the number. But in the Bhaddekarata Sutta, and the Buddha talks about it as a fortunate attachment in terms of that encouragement to not revive the past, not to dwell in the past, or how it could have been, how it should have been, how it used to be. There's feelings of nostalgia or regret, complaint about how things have been in the past and so on. But to see that is something that the mind is doing in this present moment. Similarly, when the mind gets drawn into worrying and hoping and planning, and inks that in as what's going to happen, how it's going to be, then we're missing the present. So the encouragement in Bhaddekarata Sutta is to not spend time reviving the past or dwelling on hopes of the future, but to bring the attention to the presently arisen state. So that so this is what I would say is that the first part of living wisely, or one aspect of it, is that opening the heart here and now to how the world is, whether it's the results of our own personal choices, whether it's the results of the weather, the fires in California that have been raging again this year, and lots of smoke and orange skies. And here in England, we haven't had fires, but we're now into the autumn season, and the summer is definitely over. The weather is not under personal control to a great extent. Whether what we experience is the effect of choices made by the government, made by members of our family, the vast array of different conditions, they have come together. The laws of physics, chemistry, biology, the laws of human society, and the choices that we have made, they've come together to make this moment exactly this way. Here we are, I'm looking at my screen, sitting in my kuti at Amaravati, with one was face with a few people in a string above, and Zoom meeting above that, and a little green light. And this is my experience of the moment, talking to all of you, and it's come together in exactly this way. So that when we bring the attention to the presently arisen state, there'll be things that we like, things that we dislike, things that we have opinions about. But here it is. So that I would suggest that that sense of open-heartedness is essential. So noticing how the mind creates the past and the future, seeing that as something the mind is doing, and making a conscious effort to not do that, to let go, or at least not to concretize things. So that when we talk about the past, rather than saying what happened, what we can say is, I remember that, or that it's in my memory that we had this conversation, or I understand that. Similarly, for the future, one of the essential practices in the monastery is don't put anything in ink in the calendar. Put it in pencil, because plans keep changing. So that you can say, you know, I know I have a plan or I have an intention, so that we arranged this Dhamma talk this evening here in England. It's morning there in California. But we arranged this, but how it will work, maybe the connection will collapse and things will fall apart. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll carry on. We don't know. So that sense of you're not, say, trying to pretend the past didn't happen and wipe out your memory, or you're not trying to have no plans whatsoever. No, that we need to function in a practical and realistic way in our human society, in our human family, but to put those memories in a context, rather than this is what happened. I remember, this is how I remember it, or this is the way this is the way I like to think about it, or how it seemed to me at the time. And then with respect to the future, to say, well, it looks like we're going to have a good session here this evening, but who knows? And I'll talk about that a little bit more as the Dhamma teaching proceeds. So what this points to then is a conscious letting go of those constructions of past and future, and an opening of the heart to this, the shape of the world as it arrives through our senses, through sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought, memory, imagination. In this moment, it's exactly this way, as the Buddha said, to pay attention to each presently arisen state. And then in particular, and the development of wisdom is a lot around the, say, contemplating the characteristics of existence, what we call the tilakkhana, or the three signs, the three characteristics of existence. That every aspect of the world of things is in a state of change. It's anicca, it's unstable, uncertain, transient. There's no possibility that any particular experience can be permanently satisfying. It can be satisfying for a while, and it'll be pleasing, and then that satisfaction necessarily fades, or it's painful because it's an uncomfortable feeling, and that too will fade. So we say all aspects of experience are dukkha, they're unsatisfactory. They're unsatisfactory in and of themselves. Because of their transient, uncertain, changing nature, they can't provide a permanent happiness, a permanent security, and quality of well-being. And then the third of the three characteristics is anatta, or not self. So that within the whole array of experiences that we have, our memories, our thoughts, our personality, our body, that when we look for an abiding, independent self, that can't genuinely be found. We have feelings of I, feelings of ownership, my body, my screen, my Dhamma talk, my mind, my memories, my feelings, my hopes, my regrets. But when that's examined and explored, it's seen that that's necessarily a convenient fiction. It can't be an absolute truth. It's at best a partial truth, or a working hypothesis, as you say. So that we say my body, but the body is permanent, is continually changing. There's no permanence in it. I'm breathing. The oxygen that was in the room a few minutes ago is now part of my body. It's in my blood. The carbon dioxide that was in my body is now being breathed out. It's now part of Hertfordshire. So in this respect, there is a recognition that when we receive the qualities of the present moment, these are not who and what we are. These are, we might say, my mind or my body or my experience. So it's really important in terms of developing wisdom to see that's a mode of speech. That's a convenient fiction. It's like one was reading out my names. I've got many names now. You get given a title, and you get a long sort of multi-syllable name. So I was Chalkun Videsa Buddhiguna. I'm now Chalkun Raja Buddhiwaraguna. And so, yeah, and I'm also Amaravati, and Ajahn Amaro, etc., etc. So we use names as convenient fictions. They're a handy tool for referring to particular sets of experiences. So that in the sense of receiving the world, opening the heart to the way the world is, and attuning the heart to that, I feel it's really important to not establish self-view around that. To see, well, this is the experience of hearing, of seeing, of smelling, tasting, touching. Here is the mind remembering. Here is the experience of the body, and to in a way language it, to frame it in one's own perceptions and the way it sits in the heart, free of self-view, free of the conceits of I and me and mine. So when we talk about that, say, being open to the present experience and living wisely, then we can actually be present for our own life. We're again, going back to John Lennon, life is something that happens while we're making other plans. If you put those plans aside or let them be off at the perimeter, and we are paying attention to this present experience, then we're here for our own life. And this present moment is the only place that we can make a difference. So that what is I feel is useful in this respect is to see how is it that we keep getting distracted, that we keep getting drawn off into these creations of past and future, and also fantasizing and opinionating here in the present. Maybe we're not thinking about the past or the future, but we're off in some kind of fabricated realm that we've generated in our thoughts. So how can we not do that so that the mind really can attune in a full and complete way to this present reality and attune to the Dhamma, the Dharma, the fundamental reality that is timeless, that is ever present, as we say in Pali, Sanditiko, apparent here and now, Akaliko, timeless. So if we want to awaken to the Dhamma and embody the Dhamma, this Dharma college, that's the same principle. That's why it's got the name, I would say. It's like that's Dharma is the absolute reality. It's the fundamental integrative principle of all things, mental, physical, spiritual. It's the integrative principle of all things, the underlying ultimate reality of things. So if we want to attune to the Dhamma, to that fundamental reality, that requires the mind to pay attention to the present, because that's where that Dhamma, that reality, is found. It is Sanditiko, apparent here and now, Akaliko, timeless. So what causes distraction? How does the mind get carried away? So there's a couple of teachings I thought I would share in this respect. One, both of them might be familiar to many of the people tuning in. One is called the teaching of the arrow. It's the Salla Sutta. Salla, Salla, is a Pali word for an arrow. And people sometimes forget that the Buddha was a soldier before he was a monk. So his teachings have a lot of military analogies and similes in them. So this is one with a military format to it. So the image is one of a soldier on a battlefield. So the soldier is shot by an arrow. And the Buddha said, if you imagine a soldier on a battlefield, they're shot by the arrow of physical pain. So no one can avoid that first arrow. That if there's a body, if there's a mind, necessarily there will be physical pain. In the actual sutra itself, it only talks about physical pain, but I feel it translates very naturally and comprehensively to mental pain as well, and so quite say appropriately, it works in exactly the same way. But in the teaching in the sutra itself, he only talks about physical pain. So if there's a birth in the physical realm, there's necessarily going to be pain. So no one can dodge that. The Buddha himself had chronic back pain, at least in the Pali teachings. When the Buddha was 80 years old, he talks about having such a pain in his body. The only way he can feel comfort is to completely absorb his mind into the sunyata vihara, the abiding in emptiness. If he was paying attention to the sense world, he was in pain. And there's many teachings in that last year or two of his teaching career where he would say, "Sariputta, my back is paining me. I'm going to go and rest. The assembly is still wide awake. Please carry on giving a Dhamma teaching." Or he would sit leaning against a pillar in the middle of the Dhamma hall while he was giving a teaching because his back was painful. So he's a fully enlightened Buddha, totally transcendent wisdom, but he still had chronic back pain, and he still needed to work the body so that pain could be handled. So that's the first arrow. So no one can dodge the first arrow, even a Buddha. So then he goes on to say the second arrow is what the mind creates around that. It's the complaining, negotiating, worrying, blaming, what the mind does with those painful feelings. It resents them, it wants to get away from them, it's waiting for them to be over, it's worrying what they're going to turn into. Is it ever going to be over? Am I going to recover from this? So that is the second arrow. And the Buddha said that arrow is completely avoidable. And when we talk about the Four Noble Truths and the ending of suffering, it's all about the second arrow. It's not about the ending of suffering in terms of the Four Noble Truths, at least in the Southern Buddhist recension of the teachings. It's all about arrow number 2. It's not about never feeling physical pain or never feeling sadness or never having an uncomfortable emotion. Not so. It's all to do with that fretting, anguishing, resenting, complaining, hoping, fearing that gathers around a painful feeling. And again, physical pain, but also I would say a mental pain. It's exactly the same. So that model, I feel, is very helpful for us to understand. And I remember living in California and being around the Bay Area. Sometimes you'd see people wearing T-shirts or bumper stickers that said things along the lines of pain is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. So that comes straight from the Buddhist teachings. It's in a way, it's a short version of the sutta on the arrow, because that's exactly what it means. That pain is unavoidable, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And so that in this respect, it's helpful to understand that suffering is a verb, not a noun in this respect. It's something that the mind is doing. It is doing suffering. It's something that the mind is adding on to the present experience. So that when we see this, we realize that we can be with the present, and particularly to do with uncomfortable feelings, being afraid, being worried, being uncomfortable. If you have the illness, having fevers, having having the cough, having the difficulty breathing, and so on, the intense physical difficulty that can come with COVID-19, that even with great physical difficulty and discomfort, it's still up to us as individuals if the mind makes a problem out of it. And probably all of us are either in our own lives or with people around us. We've known those situations where someone had every reason to get upset or to complain or to begrudge an illness or an injury, but they were quite at ease and at peace with it, not complaining, not blaming, not worrying, not waiting for it to be over, but just here it is. It's this way. And I certainly know that a few people with that kind of skillful attitude. And so you're not going numb, you're not switching off. The mind is attuned. It's knowing that painful feeling, but in that moment, it is absolutely not a problem. Well, like if someone close to you has died, they've passed away, so you feel grief, you feel sadness in the heart of that loss. That I would say comes into the same category. We can feel that grief, but not create any suffering around it. You can have tears running down your face, and it's absolutely not a problem, if that makes sense. So maybe in the questions, people can say, but surely, Ajahn, how can you be crying and to be not suffering? But I've had that experience myself, so I can talk about it from in the context of my own life. That yes, there's great sadness, but and the tears are flowing, but it's absolutely not a problem. Similarly, when you've got some kind of injury and there's nothing you can do to get away from that ache or that pain, sometimes the mind just lets go, and it's still painful, but the mind is not waiting for it to be over. It's not negotiating. There's a great ease and peacefulness with it. So that I feel having that framework of the two arrows is really helpful. And then another teaching that relates to that very closely is about what we call conceptual proliferation. The Pali word for that is prapancha. Sanskrit is prapancha. So that means complication, the mind's capacity for making issues, getting say caught up in things and elaborating. So that again in the middle length discourses of the very helpful sutta on this, and this is sutta number 18. That one I didn't have to look up. I know this one very well. This is called the sweet morsel or the honey ball sutta. And the Buddha talks about how the mind gets caught into conceptual proliferation. And then in that sutta, it's described how there's a sense contact. You see something or feel something, you hear something, you taste something, you smell something. And so the sense contact gives rise to a feeling, pleasant, painful, or neutral. That feeling then conditions the sense perception, a color that we see, or a shape that we see, or a sound that we hear, or a taste that we know. So even before it's been named, like it's the way that, and it's interesting how this maps the neurophysiology of the process as well, because you're able to detect whether something is pleasant or painful, dangerous or attractive, even before it's fully registered in the sort of visual cortex or the auditory cortex or the kind of various regions of the brain that do the sense perception, so that you can get out of the way of an object coming towards you quickly, even before you've consciously seen anything. So anyway, so that is sanya, is a sense perception. So the feeling then conditions the sanya, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought. The sanya then conditions conceptual thought, vitakka, which is the naming of it. So that the eye sees a visual form. So like around my screen here and my kuti, I've got a red and black shawl that's sort of draped over the edges of the screen that makes a kind of theatre curtain, a sort of theatrical curtain around my computer screen. So the eye sees the color, and then the thinking mind says red and black with little gold bits. So the vitakka is the description in terms of conceptual thought. So far, so good. That's not complicated or stressful. So then what happens out of habit is that the vitakka leads on to conceptual proliferation, the prapancha. That red, actually, I don't really like that red. If it was a little bit darker or a little bit lighter, that'd be much nicer. and so on and so forth. What the mind adds on to that, the present moment experience, adding on to the pleasant, adding on to the painful, adding on to the neutral. And so that is where we spend a lot of time living in those streams of associative thought. And the more that we spend our life in reading books or in academia or filling up our head with words and ideas, concepts, then the more we've actually trained the mind to proliferate. For some of us, that's our job, is to think creatively and to create those associative strings and then select the things that are useful from amongst that. So that process does have its place in nature, but because it gets out of control, then we find ourselves anxious, ruminating. We can't sleep at night. We can't stop thinking. The mind is endlessly chattering away, commenting, recollecting, planning, and so endlessly drawn into these associative strings, into the papancha mill. And then the more that the mind gets lost in that, the more that it cements the feeling of me here and the world out there, and an tension between the two. As the mind gets born into those associative strings, then it gets lost in what I want and I haven't got, what I don't want and I'm stuck with, what I have opinions about, and how I think things should be, or I'm glad that they are that way and I want them to stay that way, and so on and so forth. So one of the great blessings of meditation and the development of concentration and the ability to focus the mind is we can train the mind to not get lost in those associated strings, so that if the mind is well trained, we can think if we want to think, and we can not think if we don't want to think. We can think creatively and imaginatively and usefully, but if we don't want to think, then we can stop thinking. And so that is what we would call a well-trained mind. And it's really hours and hours of meditation, probably the 10,000 hours or 30,000 hours of meditation. That is what is required to fully train the mind to be what they call a master of the courses of thought. That's the phraseology that the Buddha uses. One who has fully mastered the courses, the patterns of thinking. So one skillful means that we can use with learning to counteract this habit of conceptual proliferation is to notice, to make a point whenever the mind is lost in those strings of association and proliferation, to see what the mind is caught up in, wanting something that we haven't got, wanting to get away from something that we're stuck with, and so on and so forth, to see, well, where did that come from? Yeah, how did the mind get down that track? Where did it come from to arrive at this point of wanting this thing that I haven't got, or being burdened by this thing that I can't get away from? And then when you follow the strings of association back to the source, then the further you go back to the root, the simpler it becomes, in my experience. So that if you notice that you're worrying about the progress of the pandemic, or you're worried about when you're next going to be able to go to visit America or England or Thailand or wherever, so you can follow the strings of thought. If you mindfully trace your way back, then you realize, oh, that was because I saw a plane going overhead, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I'm going to be able to make that journey. It was just the sound of a plane going overhead triggered that thought. And the sound on its own is very simple. It's not burdensome or problematic. It's just a sound. Or maybe there was a sensation in the body. Maybe you just coughed. And that was a dry cough. Oh no, have I got the virus? And then it was just a physical sensation, just a little cough, and then whoop, away it flies, and we find the mind lost in those strings. So when you trace it back, it was just, well, actually, it was 20 minutes ago, and I just coughed once, and that was it. It was just because I felt a little dryness in my throat. It's not likely to be COVID-19. It was just that sensation in that moment. So that if we are, say, bringing attention to those habits, again, seeing the habits of getting lost in associative thought, in conceptual proliferation, And there's really no way around it other than training the mind in meditation to be mindful, to be aware, and then to recognize those patterns. And then what you find is if you trace it back to the source, that recognition of, oh, it was just the smell, it was just the color, it was just the sound. Really take that to heart. Notice, look at that. Where it began, it was very simple. It wasn't even personal in any way. It was just seeing a color, hearing a sound, smelling an odor. That's all. It's completely non-personal and natural physiological perceptual process. So notice that that relaxation, that easing in the heart. And so if you set the intention to do that throughout the day, as the mind gets lost in those associations, just make a habit, go back. Where did this come from? Oh, it was a sound. It was that feeling. I saw that color. That car went by in the street. Or the phone rang and it was that friend of mine. And then just letting that simplicity and naturalness be something that is clearly and fully cognized. So we're still on part one of the process here. And the last part of it, I would suggest, is along with that, approaching that on the mental side, like with his teachings on the 2 arrows and about conceptual proliferation, the other side of it is the somatic aspect. How are you holding the body? Because again, we don't realize that the body is being held in a particular way. We think of the mind as a sort of a permanent thing that's there, my mind or my body, and we don't realize that again the mind is contributing to its experience of the present through its attitude, and it's contributing to the experience of the present through the physical attitude, through the way that we're holding the body. So along with noticing those strings of thought and the habits of anxiety or regret or reminiscing or planning and hoping, that when you bring attention in the present moment into the body, how are we holding the body? Is your belly tightened in a knot? Are your shoulders up around your ears? Is your jaw clenched? What is the state of the body? And again, many of us live in a very conceptual, verbal world, and we have a lot of say gravitational pull to the mental realm. But it's very helpful to again, if we bring attention to the present, along with noticing what the mind is doing with thought and such like, to notice what is being done with the body. How is the body being held? And very often there's a stressing, a tension there. And that if we bring attention to the body, we relax, so noticing where there's kind of tightness or stressing is happening, and consciously relax the muscles of your shoulders, of your face, around your eyes, your mouth, relaxing your stomach, your arms, your hands, the hip joints, the legs. Then and taking a moment to consciously let the whole system settle, not just the mental side, but the physical side. Then this, I feel, is a very significant and radical support for wisdom. That if the body is in a stressed state, if it's tense and knotted up, then no matter how hard you try to work with the mind, that tension in the body will keep feeding those habits of stressing and worrying and fretting and planning and hoping and fearing in the mind. It feeds. It's like it's fuel for the papancha mill. It's like it's extra gasoline for the papancha engine. So that bringing attention to the present moment, relaxing the body. And even if you're walking, even if you're in the middle of some activity, you can walk in a relaxed way. You don't have to walk in slow motion or walk in any kind of particular special way, but just relax into the body. Just let the body walk. Be where you are as the body walks along. There's an easeful quality that we can have, even as we're walking or driving or again, we're not disconnecting or switching off. We're paying attention to where we're walking or where we're driving or what's going on. But there's an easing, a settling that can be brought about in the system. So then, going on to part two, if I can call it that, of this, say, of a way of developing wisdom and working with our daily life with a wise attitude. So along with receiving the effects of past causes, the laws of physics and chemistry, biology, the laws of psychology and the human family system, then we also planting causes in the present to create helpful effects in the future. So I would describe it as this is the two-part process is essentially this. So receiving the effects of past causes and then planting causes in the present to create beneficial effects in the future. So this is again, it hinges a lot around attitude and the way that we are holding our experience. So in the position that I have as an abbot or as a teacher, you're the person sitting in the middle seat. you got the title abbot, so that and I'm sure that Rinpoche or you, Wangmo, and running Dhamma College, you sit in the middle seat. You're a director or you're a teacher, you're a Rinpoche, and then you get looked upon as being an answering machine. If you've got a problem, go to the person in the chair, because that's their job to have the answers. So what is very, very helpful with respect to the planting the causes for in the present is to see how very, very often we have extremely unrealistic expectations. So when I'm receiving people's questions, and with the pandemic, our gates are closed. We don't have any daily visitors now, but I still have these events or questions from other residents. So over and over and over again, people have extremely unrealistic expectations about their life. Like, how can I get this disease? Or my bankers is charging a ridiculous amount of interest on my loan. They've increased what I've got to pay them, and but they shouldn't do that. That's not fair. How can they do this? This is really harmful. That's not right. They shouldn't be doing that. I'm not praising the behavior of banks, but sometimes we are, say, assuming that we are in control of our life. And so over and over again, receiving people's questions, how can my mother, she was only 62. How can she died last year? She wasn't even ill. But suddenly she fell sick and she died in a few days. How could that happen? I mean, she had a really good diet. She was healthy. How could she die when she was 62? And so on and so forth. I'm not making fun. I'm not mocking anybody. But over and over and over again, we have these expectations that corporations will have our best interests in mind all the time, or they'll be, or that our family are somehow always going to be free of disease, and that it's rather like driving through the city and assuming that every traffic light is going to be green when you get to it. Well, maybe, but probably not. Or that whenever you need a parking space, there's always going to be one. Even if you pray to, I think Beverly the Parking Angel was very popular in San Francisco, and I lived there. So that sometimes there is no parking space. So that if we are carrying around these expectations that we're in control of our life, and that nothing bad should happen to our family, we should always be free of disease, we should always be treated fairly, everyone should be kind to us all of the time, then we are being really unrealistic, really unrealistic. So that one of the things about planting skillful seeds for the future is to really change that attitude. to see that our life is part of an organic system that we are not in control of. In the period of our lives, if you're blessed with being mobile, you can walk, you can see, you can hear, you have these kind of blessings of abilities, then we can, and that's the sort of the standard set of sort of complete abilities for people. We can see, hear, we can move around, we can think. We don't have any kind of major cognitive disabilities. Then we think, well, this is our right, and that this is how life should be. But that's a tremendous conceit, I would say. And that if we really look at how life works, we don't really have very much control at all. And so rather than thinking that how can this pandemic happen and we're not allowed to travel here, we can't travel there, how could they let all these fires happen? How could the government do this? How could they pass these laws? How could the banks treat me this way? It's like, well, look at the way the natural order functions. That our body is part of a living system. That any one of us right now could have an aneurysm, a blood vessel in our brain goes pop, and you have 3 or 4 seconds before everything goes dark and it's all over. That's the fact. There's nothing going wrong. That's just the way our lives operate. And so that I hope it doesn't happen. I'm not expecting it to happen, but it can happen. And so that when we see that our illusion of control is very deceptive, just because we take this to be what a human being can, it's a very ableist perspective, really. This is what a human being can expect. And it's unfortunate if you're not fully able in this way. But that set of abilities, I would say, it gives you about 1% of control over your life. The other 99% is out of our control in terms of how biology works, how the family works, how society works, how the environment works. A vast proportion of it is not under personal control. So when we lose control, when we get an illness or an injury or the lockdown because of the pandemic and having to wear face coverings and such like, then rather than our fully independent life going from 100% independent to being told I can't do half the things I should be able to do, and saying 50% of what I should be able to do I'm not allowed to do, is actually, I would say, it's more like going from 1% to a quarter of a percent. But that's the only measure of control we really had, that our personal decisions could have an effect in a tiny area of our lives and our experience of the world and society. So it's very deceptive. So in this respect, the Buddha gave a set of recollections and reflections to help us do our homework, really, to consider what we're a part of, what our living system is like. And so these can sound very depressing. They're a bit challenging and threatening to the ego, but they are designed to be liberating to the heart. So these are called the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. They are: I am of the nature to age, I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken, I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. And then the 5th one is: I'm the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the end. Thus we should frequently recollect. So those 5, particularly the first 4 of those, are pretty depressing for most people. It's like, no, don't say that. People, like just yesterday, somebody asked for a blessing for their birthday and made a point of, or actually, a woman wrote asking for a blessing for her husband for his birthday, and so the wording of the dedication was such that may my husband call his age whatever he wants to call it. So we get embarrassed about how old we are. We don't want to talk about, well, I'm 64, as if it was some kind of a problem or a burden or a something to be embarrassed or upset about. I am of the nature to age. We have all aged since this Dhamma teaching began. It's now on my clock. It's 6:58 here in the UK. So I guess 10:58 and 2 minutes to 11 there in California. So when we're all about an hour older than we were. We are of the nature to age. That's not debatable. We are of the nature to sicken. Even the healthiest people, as Ajahn Chah would often point out, even the doctors get sick. That the healthiest of lifestyles, the healthiest of bodies, they have to come to an end at a certain point. These systems are fragile. Many years ago, I did a degree in physiology, as mentioned in the little bio at the beginning. And after 3 years of studying physiology at London University, I came to the conclusion that these bodies are so complicated, they can't work. There's too many things to go wrong. Sometimes I would sort of stagger out of the lecture theatre thinking, how are we even walking? How can we see and hear? We used to, I had some lectures at Middlesex Hospital in near the main university buildings on Mallet Street, and you go out onto the street after the lecture, people driving cars. How can they do that? It's impossible. There's so many things that can go wrong with this body, and yet most of us function fairly predictably most of the time. It's incredible. So I am of the nature to sicken. Yeah, of course. I am of the nature to die. That these bodies have been born, and that which is born has to die. That which integrates disintegrates. That's the nature of all forms in the natural world. That's without exception how they operate. If something comes together, it comes apart. All things are in a state of change. And all that is mine, beloved, and pleasing will become otherwise, will become separated from me. No matter how hard you try to keep what you call yours, inevitably separation happens. You can't keep a thing, whether it's a person or a relationship, an object. The things move, they change, they mutate, they transform, they shift. And so that all that is mine, beloved, and pleasing will become otherwise. That mindness, what's called mamankara in Pali, that mindness is a convenient fiction, like my kuti, my robes, my body, my computer, my Dhamma talk. It's a convenient fiction to talk about it in this way. So these subjects of frequent recollection, they help us basically to do our homework and to establish a change of attitude. So when we find the mind getting lost in blaming and resenting, hoping, complaining about the world, about our body, about the government, about our family members, about the various institutions, that the company we work for, our parents, our children, our spouses, our whoever, whatever, then to take this, say, reflection on the natural order and say, well, why should I expect it to be different? Or why should I think it should always please me? Why should I be the one person that everybody likes all of the time? Yeah, even the Buddha managed to irritate people. He was a totally enlightened Sambuddha. He is totally enlightened, totally pure-hearted, the embodiment of goodness and wisdom, and yet he could still irritate people. People got upset with him. So, but yet when people complain about us or they criticize us, say, how dare they? Well, how can they talk to my child like that? Well, that's not fair. We're shocked, we're surprised, or we think it's something's gone wrong. So that this, I feel, is extremely helpful in establishing a skillful attitude to really think and notice how the natural order works. So when we get an illness, obviously we take medicine, or we seek treatment, we have an operation, or we use a vaccine, or whatever it might be. Yeah, but we don't think that the illness is somehow things going wrong. It's just that's how nature works. This is the natural order. For the coronavirus, landing in a human body is an opportunity to expand and to develop the nation, to help the company grow, as it were. We're just a fertile environment for the coronavirus to develop in. I'm not saying we shouldn't do something to ameliorate that and stop it happening, but from the coronavirus point of view, we're just landscape. We're a food source. We are an environment for them to live in. And I remember when I went to live in Thailand, I was a novice in Thailand, living in the hut in the forest there. You really get to realize that as a human being, you are part of the food chain. That you sit in a forest in a little hut with no glass, no windows. There's no glass in the windows. Everything is open to the breezes. So, well, mosquitoes and other creatures they come in and you're an attractive food source for them. So of course they come and feed, And you can say, don't eat me, don't bite me. And I'm trying to meditate. But as far as the mosquito is concerned, you just arrived in their district with a big sign saying, free food, come and eat. So when we change our patterns of thinking in this way, this goes a long way to reducing the feelings of resentment or impatience or blaming. It doesn't mean that we're passive or insensitive or we don't take steps to, say, treat illness or to write to the bank manager to suggest they could charge a different rate because of all these reasons A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. We're not passive. We can skillfully take action and help to try and make things a bit more fair, a bit more say balanced, and particularly like in the US and here in the UK as well, the Black Lives Matter movement that has been so prominent through this year. Yeah, get out and make a noise and point out how things can be done differently. That's part of the picture, but then creating a sense of hatred and alienation, aversion that in the mind, and dwelling in that, rather than seeing how nature doesn't work in those completely fair and friendly humanitarian ways. That's not how the natural order works. We can contribute what is possible to help things to be arranged more skillfully and more equitably in the human family, but it's not entirely under our personal control. So we can make input, but it's really not entirely up to each one of us. We can't establish a complete control. And so I feel that if we have a more skillful attitude and we realize that we have a very small amount of control and we're part of a natural living system, then what we do, we can do more effectively. We are not alienating ourselves from others. It's working with the society, working with nature, working with the body, working with the pandemic, rather than against it, rather than making it enemies and creating contention and opposition. That you might have very differing views from somebody else, or you might want the coronavirus to go and live somewhere else, to stay outside of Amaravati Monastery, for example, but you don't have to be dwelling in hatred. You don't have to be dwelling in aversion. You don't have to make that an enemy. And that's a power that we have. So one reflection on this that I'd like to offer is a very simple way that Ajahn Chah would put this. He made a very curious statement a few times. He said, the Buddha is uncertainty. The Buddha is uncertainty, which might seem a very strange statement to me. But the way he followed the logic he was following to state that is like this. So the Dhamma, the truth of the way things are, is that everything is uncertain. The Buddha said, "One who sees the Dhamma sees me. One who sees me sees the Dhamma." So if the Dhamma is the truth of uncertainty, and the Buddha said, if you see the Dhamma, you see me, then ergo, the Buddha is uncertainty, if you can follow the little logical string there. So the Buddha is uncertainty. And what that means on a practical level is the mind that sees that things are uncertain, that you can't be sure of the outcome. You can't be sure of all the things that are contributing to a particular situation. You can't be sure of where things are going to go. You can't be sure what somebody else is thinking. You can't be sure that your memory is correct or that your plans are going to work out. That mind that knows that uncertainty is the Buddha mind. It's the awake, aware, wisdom mind. This is what Ajahn Chah was saying. And I think that's a very helpful model to use, that the mind that knows all things are uncertain is that the mind is awake and is attuned. It doesn't mean that we are in a state of anxiety or insecurity, but rather what it's doing is it's not taking for granted that we know what's going to happen. We know what the fact is. We know that what somebody is, where somebody is coming from. We don't say, well, we hear somebody say something, and we can say, well, it sounds to me like you're coming from this particular position, or or as I was talking about earlier, making plans. I have a plan to finish this talk at about 7:15, in about 7 minutes time. I have a plan to wrap up about 7:15. Whether that'll happen or not, I don't know. We'll see. So that kind of uncertainty, that that is a gateway to wisdom. Ajahn Chah called it the standard of the noble ones. And so when you are applying that quality of uncertainty, that reflection on uncertainty, rather than from an ego-centered point of view, from the position of self-view, that uncertainty makes us worried. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. Oh! For the ego, that's worrying, that's frightening, that's threatening. I don't know what they're thinking. Oh, what do they think about me? What should I do? Oh, I don't know. It's frightening, it's worrying, or it can result in blaming or attacking or contending. When that uncertainty is say appreciated with the perceptions colored by self-view and the conceit of identity, I, me, and mine. When the perceptions are not colored by those habits of self-view, when that uncertainty is applied from a place of clarity, then rather than producing anxiety and insecurity and contention, it produces freedom. The result is, of course, oh yes, that's right. How could it be otherwise? So that a very simple practice for developing this, again, planting the causes for a skillful attitude in the future. Whenever you see your mind making a judgment, that's good. Well, that's bad. Well, that's this is great. Well, that's awful. But whenever you assume you know how things are going to turn out, or you assume you know what somebody else is thinking or what they're doing, to simply bring to mind the phrase, "Is that so?" And again, this is one of Ajahn Chah's very simple but very pithy practices. Just it takes you have to be quick on your feet to do it, because if you count the number of times the mind makes a judgment during the course of a day, it's a lot. It's a lot of judging. I don't like, this is good, that's bad, it should be this way, it shouldn't be this way. There's a huge amount of that in I'm not reading anybody's mind, this is just how we function. So just to notice over and over and over again, when the mind makes a judgment, that's beautiful, is that so? That's awful, that's really ugly, is that so? In that recognition, you think, well, according to my conditioning, I call that beautiful, I call that delicious. Somebody else would taste that and go, ugh, do you eat this stuff on purpose? You know, as a Brit, the taste of Marmite is delightful. For people who didn't grow up in the UK, Marmite might be very off-putting. And people in California did say to me when they sampled it over time at Bayagiri, when they would come to visit, do you eat this stuff on purpose? Is it supposed to taste like this? So, is it delicious or is it not? It's not a sure thing. So if you bring this to mind, is that a sure thing? Is that so? Then watch what happens in the heart. There's a spaciousness, there's an ease that happens, there's a settling that happens in the heart when you bring that to mind. Is that so? This is exactly what I wanted. Is that so? Oh, this is exactly what I didn't want. Is that so? There's a leveling, a settling that comes with that. Because in that moment, the heart is awakening to Dhamma. It's awakening to the fundamental nature of the citta itself. The heart is awakening to its own nature, which is the Dhamma itself. The mind is Dhamma, the heart is Dhamma itself. So that there's a recognition, oh, of course, that's right. And it doesn't even have to be thought. You don't even have to think that's right, because there's a knowing. It's like when you put a shoe on and it fits, you don't have to think it fits. You know it fits before you think the thought it fits. There's a feeling, there's the Vedana before the Vitakka, so that there's the mind knows, oh, right, of course, that's just a judgment. Of course, this is only one perspective on it. So this is an extremely helpful practice to, say, change the attitude, the way that the mind holds the experience of the world, and then it plants those skillful seeds, because then when things come out the way that you like, then rather than thinking, yes, I succeeded, then you know, oh, well, this is a sweet taste, this is pleasant, but what will it turn into? I don't know. It's not a sure thing. This is going to stay good. If things turn out badly, rather than, oh no, I failed, this is awful, I got it all wrong, what will they think of me? So, well, instead, when there is this reflection on uncertainty, it's like, well, that didn't work, but what will this turn into? Or is this a completely bad thing? It feels completely bad, but is that so? And then the heart recognizes, no, it can't be completely bad. And you can, in many respects, many occasions, we learn really useful lessons from the worst mistakes that we make. So bringing this to mind, is that so? Is that a sure thing? And over and over again during the day, and see what transformation there comes in the heart, the change of view, the change of attitude in the heart. An even simpler version of that is just to say, so, this is great. So, this is awful. So, this is exactly what I wanted. So, this is exactly what I didn't want. So, yeah. I'm really afraid of getting ill. So, yeah, I'm not really worried about getting ill. So, there might be sound like a bit of a damper, or being a sort of wet blanket, as we say in the UK. But it coming from a place of wisdom, again, there's exactly that balancing and the kind of providing of more space in the heart. The mind holds things and sees things from a nature-centered perspective rather than a self-centered perspective. It's seeing things according to Dhamma, according to the laws of nature. But the last thing that I would say, going to the final part about this, about distinguishing between mind and wisdom, I would say that it's very much connected with this last point that I was making, because when we talk about, it depends how you use the word mind. I think in this respect, mind would be thinking, emotions, imagination, memory, intentions. We would say that our mind is that. And then what we think of as knowledge or understanding or an intellectual grasp of how things are, if you categorize mind as being all of that, then I would say that's the stuff of the mental world, the stuff of emotion, of thought, of imagination, of memory, of what we call mental formations. So just using the word mind to refer to that. So I would say that wisdom is distinct from that, in that wisdom is not a formation. It's a wordless, unconstructed knowing, unformed quality of awareness. It's not a thought. Wisdom, again, in English, the usage, wisdom is often used in terms of knowing about something. But in terms of Buddhist psychology, we use the word wisdom as a synonym for awareness, for a wordless knowing. It's not knowing about things. So to quote T.S. Eliot from his choruses on the rock, choruses from the rock. Where is the wisdom that is not lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge that is lost in information? So using mind in this respect, that's the information and knowledge, knowing about things. So wisdom, I would say, is the knowing, kind of knowing with a capital K, or you can say vidya. In Tibetan, you call it rigpa. Avijja is ignorance, not knowing. So again, ignorance is not a matter of not having information. Ignorance is not seeing clearly, and vidya, awareness, is seeing clearly. So that then, in that respect, wisdom is has a transcendent quality and it's not formed. It's an awakened awareness. So when we talk about taking refuge in the Buddha, it's embodying that awakened awareness. So taking refuge in the Buddha is being awake, being aware, and so that then the one of the things, and what that relates to with respect to this reflections on uncertainty, is you can know that you don't know. You can be aware of not knowing something. You can be fully cognizant. You can be fully awake, fully aware of not knowing what the time is. It's now 7:18, so at 7:19. I've just gone over my I've gone over my mark. So you can know that you don't know, so that that quality of vicca, or awareness, that knowing, is not dependent on having knowledge, or having answers, or having conceptual explanations for things. It's a quality of awakeness. So, and it's far more valuable, I would say. That Buddha wisdom is the refuge. The information is not the refuge. Conceptual knowledge is not the refuge. That awakened awareness is the refuge. So I will draw things to a close there and offer these thoughts for consideration. And I hope that the people feel free to type in your questions into the chat box, and then I've asked Wang Mo to kindly sort through them and then pass them on for me to respond to. Anyone?
Thank you so much, Venerable Ajahn Amaro. That was just wonderful. There are some questions here in the chat box, and maybe I will turn it over first to Richard if there's a particular question that maybe arises from this sharing in the Dhamma. Richard, and then we can go into the questions in the chat box.
Yes, Ajahn, actually a question that I asked and a number of people have been asking. I've been collating the questions. Who is the person in the picture behind you? Because very interesting looking person there, and we're wondering who it is.
That is a photograph of the great master Shu Yun, and he was one of the most preeminent Buddhist teachers in the modern times. He was born in 1839, and he passed away in 1959. He was 120 when he passed away. He's Chinese. He was so highly respected in China. He was appointed the head of all 5 lineages of Chinese Buddhism: the Sutra school, the Mantra school, the Vinaya school, the Secret school, and the Chan school. They all wanted to have him as the head. So that's, and if you know anything about Dharma politics, that's pretty extraordinary. He made a vow to be a monk for 100 years, which he succeeded in doing. He became a monk when he was 20, and he passed away when he was 120. And so this photograph was given to me. It was actually a disciple of Master Shu Yun gave it to one of our monks when he was visiting one of their monasteries in China, and so he passed that on to me. So he's a very great Buddhist master, and he was I spent a lot of time in retreat. So the photograph there was taken. I guess he'd been in retreat for a long time, so he's got a good head of hair and a wispy beard. That I think he'd managed to be in seclusion for a long time. And so some of the pictures of him are with a fully shaved head, and some of them are him with a sort of mountain yogi, just come out of the cave appearance.
Thank you.
And I wonder, Ajahn, could I just ask you one other question? Then,
Sure.
then I've sent one more. I've tried to collate all the questions that have come in. You use the term the heart,
Yes.
and then you talk about the mind. what does the heart refer to when you use it in this way? What is that a reference to exactly?
Well, it's tricky because the words are used a bit interchangeably in common Buddhist speech, at least in our field. So the heart, generally, I'm using as a translation for the word chitta in Pali, and so that I'm not sure what the equivalent term in Tibetan would be, but that is the quality of the mental realm which is liberated. So when the Buddha gives a description, or in the sutras, when it says that when somebody hears a teaching or they're practicing meditation and they're liberated, it says that the chitta was liberated, the hearts of those 1,000 monks who were listening to the fire sermon were liberated. So chitta is the word for that aspect of the mental domain which is liberated. So it's the transcendent quality of mind which is awake and aware. The phraseology of the title today had sort of mind is very much that sort of conditioned conceptual mind, the discriminative consciousness and conceptual thought and such like. So I was trying to use mind in that way through the talk, but I'm sure I wasn't consistent. Pretty sure I wasn't consistent. So often I will use mind in a way as a catch-all term, and so that chitta would be a sort of a subset of that, so that not just that transcendent knowing faculty, but also just using mind in a more colloquial way, like saying that the thoughts in the mind, or my mind is all over the place, that kind of terminology. So it's not 100% consistent usage, but when speaking about the heart, that I would say the best way of understanding it is the Pali word chitta. So I would say that the chitta, the fundamental nature of the chitta is Dhamma itself. Is the way I like to speak about it.
But you also mentioned vijnana as knowing. Now, is that part of
Vijja?
Vijja, is that part of chitta, or is that separate from chitta? How's it understood within the Pali tradition?
Well, the quality of vijja is like an activity of the heart, an activity of the chitta. So vijj with a long a, vijj with a vijja. So the opposite is avijja, like rigpa and marigpa in Tibetan.
Right.
So vijja and avijja in Pali. So that quality of knowing is an activity or an attribute of the chitta. So the chitta knows. So that the chitta has that activity of awakened awareness of the chitta is called vijja, or awareness, knowing.
Thank you, Ajahn.
So
unmute, darling.
I'm just going to the questions here. We're going to take turns at asking the questions here. And the second question that came up was, it is fascinating to see you referring to scientific studies of perception. Do you think that there is a useful collaboration here?
Yes, indeed. I think I've been on part of a few dialogues between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and various scientists. With Richie Davidson at Madison, University of Wisconsin at Madison, has done a lot of work with the Dalai Lama. I feel it's I don't think that Buddhism needs to be validated by science in and of itself, but the society, most of Western society, is informed by secular materialism and scientific knowledge. So that for many people to say, well, the Buddha said that there is sense contact, which conditions feeling, which conditions perception, which conditions thinking. But the Buddha said that. Well, so what? He's some holy man who lived 2,500 years ago. Big deal. But if there's a number of scientific papers that map the same process and say this is exactly how these particular functions, and here is the neurophysiology whereby that all happens, and this is useful to know because of A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. They go, oh right, because they've got the data, they've got peer-reviewed papers that show it's true. And so just quoting a great sage of ages past, for many people that doesn't carry a lot of weight. It's not a fact. It's over in the realm of religion. So in terms of the kind of the noosphere, noosphere, the sort of field of knowledge in the Western world and around the planet these days, having something scientifically validated carries a lot of weight, and it helps people to say, "Oh, that's meaningful. Okay, that's worth paying attention to." So personally, I don't feel that it needs to be. Buddhism doesn't need to be proved by science, but I do feel there's a fertile interaction between the two, and so that, say, for example, I've just been doing a book on called the mind is what matters, about the phenomenological approach of the Buddha. So one of the aspects of the Buddha's teaching is very akin to the phenomenologist approach, like Husserl and Heidegger and so on. And so that I, not that I'm a Western philosopher, but then I feel it's helpful to say, well, look, isn't it interesting how this lines up with the Western field of knowledge? And also, similarly, it lines up with some aspects of quantum mechanics and the role of phenomenology in the participator, in the kind of, rather than the experimenter, that the people like John Wheeler, the great physicist, that you can't meaningfully talk about an experimenter in terms of quantum mechanics. You can only talk about a participator in a material process, that you can't divide the object that's being observed from the nature of the observer and the observing. So that's interesting to me. So in this little book I've been doing, I sort of popped in a few references to that aspect of things as well. Again, I don't feel you have to have quantum physicists to back up the word of the Buddha, but having those sort of alignments and those fields of knowledge and understanding informing each other, I feel it can be something that helps to clarify or to say, oh right, that's interesting. I know about that, or that's familiar territory for me. All right, I get what that's talking about. Okay, and so that I feel that only I'm having a little bit of a scientific background myself. I only did a bachelor degree, but there's been a sort of natural ongoing interest in that field of psychology, and then I get invited to these kind of events because I have a little bit of a background in academic psychology and physiology, and so I've been sort of joining in the dialogues. And my personal experience of it is that there's, along the way, both for the Buddhists saying, "Well, that's interesting that you discovered that," or "That's what the science shows," and similarly for the scientists, "Oh, really? Oh, so that's how you talk about it. Now that's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that." And so there's a fertility in the dialogue, and so I do see there's a value in it. So I've put a certain amount of effort over the years joining in those kind of discussions.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Thank you so much.
Is it my turn now? Or is it yours, Doug?
You can go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so Ajahn, there's a question here. What specific mental skill is required for us to be able to follow thoughts back to their root, and how can we develop it?
Two things I would say: mindfulness and concentration. So the concentration, so that the mindfulness brings the attention to that. So, oh my goodness, I'm really lost. Wow, I really got carried away there. Like, why am I so worried? Or why am I so excited? And so the mindfulness as an ongoing practice, to be attending to, rather than just getting caught up in what's going on in the world around us or the people around us, to have a sort of 180-degree turn, to at least some of the time being directed towards, well, how am I relating to this, or what am I doing with this? And like, wow, I'm really excited, or I'm really upset, or like, oh, I'm tense, or I'm exhausted. Wow. I'm dropping on my feet here. So mindfulness brings the attention to that, and then concentration, samadhi, is really the skill of holding the attention to that single point. So, like, okay, in the intent, with the intention to follow that chain of thought back to its root, you've got to stay with that, because you go back a couple of notches from why I'm so excited about this plan, and about getting a plane ticket, and then you can get sidetracked before you go back to the root. It's like, say, oh well, American. I was booked on American Airlines. Why was I thinking of American? I should have gone on United. And then so wait, stay with it. So the samadhi is the stay with itness.
Yes.
So that, like, holding to that as an intention. Let's follow this back to the root. Okay, stay with the program. So, and then as you're doing that, then mindfulness is supporting the concentration. That's what's helping you notice if you're getting distracted. So that they work together. But mindfulness is the engager. Samadhi is a sort of follow through. But you need the mindfulness to sort of keep you on track. And then really, along with the mindfulness, when you get to the root, then there's also the wisdom faculty as well. That when you get to the source, like, that's it. It was just a sound. Sound is not self. Sound is not person. It's just an event in the field of experience. That's all. So it's really it's sort of headed by concentration, dominated by mindfulness, surmounted by wisdom is the classical way that that's talked about. So that it's when you get to the source, then rather than grasping it, it's like then there's the wisdom faculty is what helps it to be known and let go of.
Thank you.
Great. There are quite a few questions, so I'm just going to go through what appears here in front of me. There's a question here that asks about meditation. Meditation helps us to be present, but there are so many techniques, and everyone claims to have the true Buddhist approach to meditation. Different monks have different approaches. How do I know whose technique to study? Especially because it's going to require so much time to yield results.
Aye, there's the rub, the quote William Shakespeare. I get asked this question very, very often, and I would say that there's no right thing, there's no right practice. What I encourage is an experimental approach. Often people talk about their own particular method or their favorite the technique as the thing, and they promise sort of fantastic results. And for them, that might well be the case. But my experience is that everyone's different. Like, just looking at the screen, if I click through, they've got 3 screens of people and black rectangles with names and initials on. You're all different. We're all different. There's people of all different shapes, sizes, colors, different kinds of clothes, different backgrounds. There's a plant. Some people are bushes. There's all kinds of things. Some people are blank spaces. Some people are iPads. We're all different. Everyone is different. And so that's just like our shoe sizes are different, our clothing choices are different. So that there's not going to be one single method that really is best for everyone. So I encourage an experimental approach. So, and in a way, it's rather like food. It's like, that looks like an interesting restaurant. Let's try that. Or you walk past the door. Oh, that smells good. I've never been in. Oh my goodness, a Mongolian restaurant. Wow, Mongolian food. Wow, that smells good. Let's try that. So whatever catches your interest, whatever says, well, that looks interesting. I haven't tried that. Or, well, that kind of makes sense. So just to in a way draw upon your intuitive sense of what might be valuable or interesting, and then follow them. Pick it up and try it out. Say, okay, put attention onto it. Do your best to understand what the approach is. Apply it for a period of time, a couple of weeks or a month or whatever, with sincerity, and then look at what the results are. and so that is what they call vimamsa, is the reviewing, having picked up some particular task or approach, some kind of job. Then what's the result of it? Okay, I wanted to make a cake. How did it turn out? I wanted to join in with the teaching with Dhamma College. Did I manage to connect? How did it take shape? So vimamsa is then, in terms of meditation practice, okay, what's the result? And you might look at it and go, well, that was really hard work, but actually I feel pretty good. That's interesting. It was like climbing a mountain, but it was kind of good to get up there. Okay. Or that, well, that was easy, but I don't really feel any kind of benefit from it. Or, well, I tried to follow the instructions, but I'm just confused. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm getting that right or not. So, to the degree possible, picking it up, trying things out, and then seeing what brings the results. And then if there is a good result, then take it and use it. Yeah, and as the old saying goes, gold is where you find it. Not everything is going to work for everybody, and that sometimes the thing that is sort of been really great for your partner, and they're extremely enthusiastic and dedicated to it, you just can't get anything out of it. It just doesn't work. The shoe doesn't fit. And so, you respect your partner, you love them, but what they're excited and enthusiastic about, it just doesn't work in the same way. So they say, okay, well, just because it works for them doesn't mean to say it should work for me. So let's, with great respect and love, I'll leave them to do that, and then I'll just try and do something else and doing things differently. So really being guided by what works rather than what should work, or what you're being promised, or emotionally sort of pressured to have work. So, well, yeah, it looks really great, but these shoes are too tight. They don't fit. And that's what I feel is the only trustworthy or reliable measure. And so the degree to which you can connect with other people who use the same approach, people who are say, I mean, nowadays you can just do a Google search for the particular method, or I've been doing this technique, or I read this book. Anybody else out there been trying to follow this here? I find it's really helpful, but I can't understand, this word and that word. Can anyone help? And you just do a Google search, and lo and behold, you find a chat group that's been operating for the last 5 years on exactly that topic. So seeking out like-minded people that you can be use as a sounding board is really helpful, so that you don't have to be alone in that. And if there isn't a teacher available, then fellow kalyanamita, sort of spiritual friends, fellow practitioners, that's I would say is totally adequate. That they say, yeah, I don't know what that means either. It's a bit of a puzzle. Okay, just label that as a mystery, and maybe you'll find out how that works later on. And that's fine, because it's really the benefit that's coming from the practice is the thing that is important, and that's only you can know that. And if some authority says this isn't working for you, I'm telling you it's the wrong practice for you, and I've known people come to me with that saying, well, I was doing this practice and I had this and this effect. My mind was really clear. My breath went very, very quiet. My heart was completely still and bright. And then the teacher told me I was doing something wrong. What was I doing wrong? And so I said, well, to be honest, and I'm not trying to find fault with that teacher, but rather what I said to the person, well, it sounds to me like, these are very wholesome, positive mind states. And so that I don't know why the teacher would say that it's wrong because it's not producing the effect that the method was designed to produce. But what you're experiencing, that sounds really wholesome and beneficial. And so I wouldn't worry too much about, with all due respect, the teacher saying it's wrong, because what you're experiencing is liberating, it's peaceful, it brings a harmonious result. So why not follow that? So I tend to try and to take a practical approach to these things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn. I have a question here. Can you describe the sense of the body, the first foundation, that happens while you were speaking?
Can I describe it? Well, it feels exactly like this. Precisely, exactly this way. So, as I'm speaking, I can, like all of us, we can divide our attention. I was actually I remember meeting Anne Treisman, who's the divided attention expert, one of those Dalai Lama conferences. We can divide our attention. We can both have a conversation and we can pay attention to the body. And we're literally sort of going back and forth very quickly between one and the other, but we can do that. We can divide our attention. So that as I'm speaking, I can notice that my legs are crossed. I can feel that the spring in the chair. There's a cushioned quality at the back of the chair. My legs are quite happily crossed. I don't feel I need to uncross them. I can feel the sensation of the cloth of my robes on my skin. I can feel a slight tingly sensation in my fingertips. And also to a small degree on the scalp of my head. So as I'm speaking, I can feel those things in detail, but in a way, it's you don't really have to spell out the detail of it, but rather, it's like this. If you do scan the attention through the body, and then you notice, oh, actually, as I'm speaking, I mean, I'm not feeling tense, but it might be that, oh, right, what? That as you bring attention to that you notice that your stomach is really tight, or your hands are clenched. And you go, oh my goodness, that's really tense. Then, rather than in terms of practicing with that and bringing attention to the felt sense of the body as you're speaking or in the midst of activity, then rather than just, I'm feeling tense, therefore I should relax. I need to unclench my hands. I need to unstress my stomach. That's a lot of shoulding, and I must, I am. So it's more helpful to let that quality of awareness be brought to those areas of tension, that tightness, and to let that awareness have its own effect. So I call it, this is what I call an aspect of the self-adjusting universe. So that when you bring attention to the feelings of stress, then the system adjusts on its own. This body is part of the natural order. So when the awareness is there of the natural order being stressed or tensed, then things relax on their own. Rather than I should relax, rather than the managing director sending out a kind of directive, it's the natural effect of awareness of things being out of balance. So that then, if you notice that you're really slumped, then you might find that oh my goodness, my back is really bent. So you find that the body will just sort of straightens on its own, and that's no, I've straightened up. As I'm straightening, I noticed I was a bit slumped. So that way of using awareness to have its own effect is also a very helpful part of, in a sense, bringing wisdom into our world, bringing wisdom into our life. Because if I should be wise, I've got to be more mindful. I've got to let go of the past. I've got to let go of the future. I should be letting go of my conceptual proliferations. All that I should, I must, I've got to. That's a lot of doing, a lot of shoulding and stressing. So it's much more helpful if there's an awareness of those areas of imbalance of mental creation or constructing the past, the future, the physical stresses, just bringing awareness to that and letting the system adjust on its own. And then that's really letting the agent of change be mindfulness and wisdom rather than me practicing. me straightening myself out. Because the more there is me in it, the more there's going to be dukkha, that quality of imbalance and stressing in the system.
Thank you. I have two questions here that are similar, so I'm going to put them together. One person asked, can you say a bit more about creative thinking as opposed to papancha? And the second question is, can you explain the difference between papancha versus vichara for sustained thought?
Okay, I'm also aware that it's 7:48 here, so I think we're aiming to finish at 8 o'clock our time, 12 o'clock your time. We've got about 12 minutes. You'll notice I'm not very good at short answers, but I'll do my best to respond to these. So when the mind has been trained, when we say using meditation to break the habits of conceptual proliferation and to develop increased powers of concentration, focused attention, then, as I was mentioning earlier, then when we want to think, we can think, and when we want to not think, we can not think. So in that respect, creative thought, let's say, for example, with this event today, then I had the title, and so here we are, living with wisdom in our daily lives, and how to distinguish between mind and wisdom. So I literally sort of wrote that down on a page in a notebook, and then said, so what's there to say about that? What are themes that are related to that? So creative thinking, you use the meditative environment essentially to do your best thinking. So you let the mind, you can consciously bring in a theme, like the title of this talk, or say you've got a project to do, that you're an architect, or you're a school principal, or you've got your kid's birthday coming up, so that then you let your mind be as open as possible and as quiet as possible, and then you consciously bring in that theme. Say, okay, this the patient in bed number 3. Now, what is going on there? What are the symptoms, and how did she describe what had happened to her? What's going on there? So you literally sort of open the space, drop in the theme, and then see what arises from that. So this is called wise reflection, or yoniso manasikara. So when it is that imaginative thinking or creative thinking, then you find that it has a whole different quality to papancha. You think in whole sentences, and there are spaces between the sentences, so that they say that, okay, it's my kid's birthday on Thursday. Now, what did he say about what was really great last year? And what was that? It was a big hint that he dropped last week about what he was really interested in doing with his mates. Now, what was that? And where is that coming from? Because I heard him say it and I thought, oh, yeah, right. So now he said that. Now, where's that coming from? So you drop the theme into the space and then just watch what arises. And so it might be something that you expect, something that you don't expect, or what can arise might be, wow, I haven't got a clue. I really don't know what's going on there. And that in itself is helpful, because it's like that I was saying about you can know that you don't know. And so when the mind is caught up in papancha, it doesn't allow any kind of space. It just fills up every space with a fragment of a thought, a kind of a belief or a plan or a worry or an opinion or something, a line from a song or a movie, anything. But when you use a wise reflection like this, then it's thematic. There's something might arise. You go, or like I said, nothing might arise. Well, that's really interesting. I haven't got a clue what he really wants. He made that hint, and I thought at the time, yeah, right, that's not very likely. But I don't know where he's coming from. I better ask him. I better find out. So then, and then you might think, okay, so that's an interesting thought. So if I want to find out what was behind that comment that he made, how can I do that? What's the best way of doing that? Let it sit there and then see what pops up. So there's an exploring, an examining. It's rather like having a conversation. So like it's like almost like a Socratic dialogue with yourself. And so that, and if you read Ajahn Chah's teaching, oh, there's a cat that's coming as well. A cat has joined the conversation. Okay. If you read Ajahn Chah's teachings, I listen to his talks. I've got them. They're read out into English now, and you can listen to them being read over and over and over again. He describes his own exploratory process like this. He talks about the sense of investigating, exploring, looking at his own motivations. Why do I feel like that? Or that was really annoying. Where did that come from? Or like, I really want to do this. Why do I call that useful? Or like, oh, that was really upsetting. So why do I call that a problem? Why do I think that's wrong? So this internal inquiry, that was a very, very big part of his practice. And it's important to see that, because sometimes with meditation, people assume that meditation means to be not thinking. But in this respect, wise reflection is taking place within the environment of samadhi. It's not interrupting the samadhi, it's part of the samadhi. So you're using creative and exploratory thought in the environment. You're paying total attention to the present. The object is changing a little bit. There's a flow of conceptual thought and space, but you're not distracted. The mind isn't wandering. It's rather like hearing a variety of sounds. Yeah, there's a car going by, there's a person speaking in the next apartment, then now it's silent, there's a piece of music going on. There's a variety of things. You're totally attuned to what's happening. So that's, I would say, that's how this creative thought or wise reflection, yoniso manasikara. Another Pali term for it is Dhamma vichaya, which literally means investigation of reality or consideration of reality. So the other question was about vichara. The vichara. So I would say that vichara is very similar to wise reflection. The question, remind me, was the question was how is vichara different from papancha? Was it?
That's right.
Yeah. So it's kind of exactly the same, really. So vichara. So that these two aspects of thinking, vitaka is sustained thought, and then vichara is applied thought. So the metaphor that's used for this is taking a nail. I haven't got a nail, but I've got a pen. So imagine this is a nail. So so vitaka is placing the nail. I'll put it at the edge of my screen where you want the nail to go in, and then vichara is hammering the nail in, following that through. So that the vitaka is putting your mind onto the theme, what you want to consider or assessing. So they are two of the jhana factors. So when the mind is in first jhana, it can use sustained and applied thought. So there's still thinking going on even as the mind is in first jhana. Sustained and applied thought. And so that thinking is going on, but the mind is not distracted. And then the vichara is, I would say, very, very comparable, if not synonymous with that investigation, with wise reflection, because you're following through that theme. And then usually if the mind is aiming at concentration, then it will be the vitaka and vichara will be noticing the sound will be the vitaka, and then okay, that sound is very loud. the thought arises that I should have closed the window before I sat down to meditate, but I'm making a decision just to let it be loud and not interrupt the meditation. That would be the vichara, following that through, even as the mind is concentrating. So just let it be loud sound from the street. I'm not going to make an issue of that. I'll just leave it as it is. So that there's again with vichara and yoniso manasikara, there's a measured quality, there's a spaciousness, and you come to the end of the sentence, say, is that all there is on that? Is there anything more? Leave it open, and okay, that's it. Nothing else to come up with that.
Wonderful. Well, this has certainly been 2 hours of wise reflection, especially hearing from Venerable Ajahn Amaro. And we thank you so much, especially during these very uncertain times where so much is in our mind about how to deal with this pandemic. And certainly over here in California, we've had our bout of fires and so many different things that are unexpected. But just to hear the Dhamma at this time just gives us a sense of calm and peace. And perhaps we'll go away from this talk and reflect on what Ajahn shared with us today. We will be sharing this talk by sending you all the recorded version. And I'm sorry that we weren't able to answer all of your questions. There were a few left, and we also had some questions on Facebook Live, Ajahn. But maybe we can keep that for another day. And we'll be having another series of talks starting next month with Venerable Ajahn Pasano and then Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi in January. And we welcome you all back into this forum. And we would love to invite Ajahn Amaro to Dhamma College when the opportunity arises.
Thank you very much. The future is uncertain.
Yes, yes. And if anyone would like to make an offering, I mentioned in the chat, please go to Amaravati Monastery. It is in the chat box. I'll also send you a link. And we all send you our very warmest greetings and gratitude to you, Ajahn, for this very auspicious talk today. Thank you on behalf of Dharma College and all of our dear friends in Dhamma. Thank you so much.
Yes, no, thank you. It's very nice to see so many familiar faces in your little rectangles. A few well-known and dear Californian and American, Canadian memories. So I won't say I miss you because I don't. Don't take that personally because I never miss anybody. So it's very lovely to see your faces and to be participating in this way. So go well. I will leave you all now.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you all. Thank you.